Yo, what up, though? This is Jay Sound, and we are going to be going over my top five favorite tracks that I've created back in 2023. Morning Rise in Okinawa. That was definitely a fun track to make because that was the first time that I spent time living abroad. I spent time in Japan, specifically Roppongi, Tokyo, for 4 months back in 2018. And I was out there as an assistant for an assignment to do artistic development for J-pop bands. So it was pretty cool. That was a really dope, living experience. It was amazing to be out there for that long and really, immerse myself in the culture of Japanese culture. And I remember taking a trip over to this beautiful island called Okinawa. And it was just so vastly different of just like, even certain Okinawans don't even take to them being called Japanese, at least from what I've learned from speaking to, locals out there. And just because of there's a very deep historical context, if y'all want to Google that. But yeah, I remember just being over there and I was just like, man, this is like night and day from being over in Roppongi, Tokyo, and then coming over here, which is like an hour and a half, hour flight or whatever. And then it's like all this tropical energy and palm trees everywhere, people in shorts all the time and sandals and, maybe no shirt, it's very beach life. And that was just such an eye-opening experience to just realize how vast Japan really is, and I feel like I only really scratched the surface on one part of Japan. There's still so many other just terrain to cover. So I definitely want to go back for sure, but Morning Rise in Okinawa was definitely a tribute to that, just because of the vibe and, the instrumentations that I chose was very much thought out to the best of my ability to try and encapsulate the feeling that I felt from Okinawa. 2 a.m. Taco Run. Man, this is such a beautiful album that I created. Paradise Motel is definitely a real place, and it's a real place because it takes place in LA, so, and I've never had the pleasure of being at this particular motel yet. It's a very legendary vintage motel. For anybody who has been there, it's definitely a vibe for sure. But I remember seeing just film photos of it, film photographs of this place, and I was just like, man, this is such a dope spot, just to be at. And every time that I thought about creating a project, I just kept coming back to making a tribute to this particular vibe of Paradise Motel and 2 a.m. Taco Run kind of speaks to my time being out in LA and I'll just really just on the West Coast in general, and it really just is a tribute or homage to friendship. It could be friendship, it could be romance, anybody that you're really, spending some time with in life, and you're kind of just enjoying the bliss of life, just the enjoyments of it, not really taking things too seriously, and that's really what the track encapsulates for me. There's been so many times when I used to live on the West Coast where, there wasn't really a lot of restaurants open, so sometimes you would get lucky, especially in LA, and you maybe see a food truck that was open late, a taco truck specifically, and you're just like, yo, man, just want to pull up and get some tacos, you know what I mean? Maybe you're just coming out of a club or something, or, for my dancers out there, maybe y'all just had a long dance session or something, you're all hungry, but, a lot of things are closed now at this point. Maybe you get lucky, you see a taco truck out, on the curb that's still open, so you already know what time it is. You know what I mean? So that was definitely one of those type of tracks for me. And like I said, it wasn't anything that was super serious or super deep. It's a homage to friendship and camaraderie, and just building just really blissful memories. So for me, that's what makes number 4. Somewhere in Malibu. Man, Somewhere in Malibu was a vibe. I've only been out there once. But I do remember my time out there, and it was very, very beautiful. I think it was really just a day trip. So me and my ex partner, we just went there and back. But it was really fun. It was really amazing. I remember just the beautiful palm trees that was there, the vast, like, huge cliffs that that you would see, these like gorgeous and sometimes like gaudy, like just $1 million, $1 billion homes just sitting on the edge of the coast. And then you have like these gorgeous cars you would see, from exotic to modern to, of course, like a lot of classic vintage cars too. And that was just, it was very like aesthetically pleasing to the eye, like just stimulating of all these different, like, just eye candy everywhere, nature wise, and also just like machinery that was just really beautiful. So I remember, that time in Malibu was really gorgeous. And I don't know where that idea even came up, because it was years ago when I went. But for whatever reason, that popped up, and somewhere in Malibu was just the vibe. And I've been getting more familiarized with vocoder as well, so that was really great to put that in there, even though it wasn't like a song, but just to kind of put something that's kind of memorized, things that can get stuck in your head for a little bit. So yeah, that was definitely a bop for me. So I would have to say that's number 3 on the list. Club Nocturnal. Yo, this was such a difficult track just to put on like as number 2, because when I was creating Nocturnal, I think it was like, besides Sunset, I think that was like the only other album that really felt like a soundtrack to me. And there was just, just the titles itself, everything that went into creating Nocturnal. It made it really difficult to pick just one track that was my favorite, but I do feel like I made the right choice with Nocturnal, or Club Nocturnal, I should say, because I definitely wanted to make something that really obviously could be, for the club sake, something that you could really dance to. And it was almost like, for me, it was kind of a tribute to Loose Ends, like the classic 80s group, R&B group back in the 80s. And yeah, you can definitely hear the influence, from the 808s to even some of the voice samples that I took from the classic Triton, the Core Triton. And yeah, I just remember creating it too. Like, I don't know, like for other producers or composers out there, I know y'all know what I'm about to say, y'all can relate to it. When you're starting to really create something, and then you get in this particular bag or mode where it's like, oh, I'm onto something. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how it's gonna finish yet, but I'm onto something. And so you just stay in it until you finish it. And that's exactly how Club Nocturnal felt for me, because I didn't really know exactly yet how the finished product was going to sound, like when it was actually finished. But I knew the process leading up to that was so fun to create. And I just remember I was head bobbing to the point where my neck was hurting. So so I knew for sure I had something on my hands. I was like, yo, I have to do this one as the last track for this album, because it's got to end on this kind of note, because everything else was like so dark. You know what I mean? Like, that was definitely the darkest album I've went so far. Just as far as like tone and like the atmosphere I created. You know what I mean? Obviously it's called Nocturnal, so right, but yeah, so I knew for sure I wanted something to really contrast everything else that you've already heard, on that album leading up to this one, and it was something that really just came out of left field, so yeah, for me, I feel like you can play that 5, 10, 15 years down the road and it's still gonna slap, and that for me is really what creates a timeless track. So yeah, for sure that's gonna make number 2 on my list, Club Nocturnal. Red Skies. So this was a toss-up between Red Skies and Palms at Dusk, just off the fact, like, those are by far 2 of my absolute favorite compositions I've ever created. ever. Like, and I've been producing and composing for a very long time. But those for sure, just like every time I hear them, I'm just like, God, like I actually created this. So yeah, it was definitely a toss up, but I did obviously, originally just end up going with Red Skies because Red Skies is definitely a little bit more simple as opposed to Palms at Dusk, because obviously with Palms at Dusk I took more of like a live instrumentation approach, as if it was something where you actually were listening to a live performance, which is why there were so many different layers coming in and going out. And that was something I almost like really wanted to pay homage to George Duke, just off listening to a lot of how he composes music and just the things that he chooses to create. And yeah, so that was that. But with Red Skies, it really reminded me, with creating it, I went into the mind frame of like almost like a early 90s, maybe mid 90s action or drama thriller film. And one of the films that came up to mind was Rising Sun. For those of you who've seen it, with Sean Connery and Wesley Snipes. Another one that came up is Black Rain, even though that takes place in the 80s, obviously. And then too, like even like just on TV show premises, like Miami Vice. Miami Vice has always been a huge like inspiration and influence for me musically, just off of the compositions from Jan Hammer, but also to Tom Truman, sorry, not Tom Truce, Tom Truman, or Tim Truman, one of the two. I can't remember, but yeah, both of those two for sure have influenced a lot of like that particular sound, like if we're talking like soundtrack mixed with like electronic. So Red Skies was just such a beautiful take, and I knew that I wanted something to really come on the tail end of Orange Skies, which obviously takes place on Sunrise. And I knew I wanted it to really elevate what I already did with Orange Skies, where you even hear like just the mood change as well. And then it's going a little bit deeper into the actual aesthetic and just the sonics of it all, of playing more like this is more of a soundtrack type of body of work. So yeah, for me, I think that's a huge reason why this is like number one on the list, because there was so much thought put into not only just the track, but just the body of work in general for Sunset. So yeah, for me, that's what's making number one on the list. Yo, I hope you enjoyed that. I know I did. All those tracks are out. All the albums are out. So please, if you've not listened to those yet, if you've not purchased them, everything is on Bandcamp and also on most of streaming platforms today. All right, y'all. Peace.